Okay, so can we start now? Okay. So hello everybody, thank you so much for joining our session about the nature-based solution for climate action with sound water cycle management. Okay, sorry. So my name is Yumiko Asayama, Manager of Japan Water Forum and also Secretariat of the NowNet. NowNet is Northern Water Network, which consists of 7 countries of Europe, Japan, Korea, Global Water Partnership, and World Water Council to exchange experience and good practice to address water challenging, interacting with multi-stakeholder of each member countries. In this session, we are focusing on the nature-based solution since 2019, and we will discuss the value of nature-based solution to mitigate water-related disaster, sharing lessons learned from nature-based solution project in urban and rural area, focusing on the watershed level from Europe, Asia, and Middle East. We will discuss how we can overcome trade-off and challenging and scale it up using technology, governance, and financing arrangement. Today, we have 8 speakers, and from now, I would like to invite Dr. Anna Tenberg, Swedish Waterhouse, to moderate this session. So, Anna, thank you so much for helping us to moderate this session.
Thank you, Yumiko. I have the pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Professor Lee-Young Kim from the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Konjo National University of Korea. And he is going to talk about technical know-how for the application of nature-based solutions as flood risk management in river basins in Korea. So, Professor Lee-Young Kim, the floor is yours. So please upload your presentation.
Okay, so hello everyone. Yeah, this is Lee-Young Kim from the Konjo National University in Korea. Today I want to present application of nature-based solutions as a flood risk management. Due to climate changes and urbanizations, in the last decades, many cities in Korea are experiencing the floodings. The design rainfall for stormwater pipeline in Korea it is 50 years for main pipelines and 30 years for branch lines. The river design rainfall for flood management is between 50 to 200 years. But in the last 50 years, the impervious area of Seoul has increased more than 8 times. These land use changes and climate changes are increasing the inundation of cities. On the 8th of this month, there was a very big storm in Seoul. As shown in this photo, the rainfall of 141 millimeters per hour, it was occurred. It caused great damage to people and properties. Also, 2 years ago, the rivers was flooded with 429 millimeters of daily rainfalls in Namwon cities. Pipeline improvement, it is really necessary to respond on flood caused by land use changes and climate changes. However, it is very difficult in terms of cost. So therefore, flood management utilizing the nature-based solutions and pipeline improvement at the same time, it is really necessary. Urban flood management, it requires the application of LID, green infrastructures based on nature-based solutions. This case shows that urban flooding can be solved when stormwater improvement and LID are performed together. If we apply pipeline improvement or LID only, it's really impossible to solve all of inundation problems in the city areas. But if we apply LID and pipeline improvement together, then we can solve the problems of inundations. And also we can expect many of ecosystem services. This case, it is an ecosystem services that show when we apply the nature-based LID of a city. In the Korea Ministry of Environment, we applied various nature-based solutions with the LID in Jeonju cities to derive many of our ecosystem services. We derived water quality improvement, groundwater recharging, heat island mitigations, carbon reductions, air quality improvement, and landscaping improvement. Nature-based solutions can also reduce the river flooding together. The main nature-based techniques, it can be include removal of embankment of upstream areas when the population is declining regions. And also we can apply the creation of stream reservoirs, restoration of floodplains, retreat of dike, diversification of river sections, and creation of riparian buffers. This is the cases of Hanpyeongcheon stream restored using nature-based solutions from 2009 to 2022. In Hanpyeongcheon, various nature-based solutions, it was applied as shown in these figures. This is a very excellent cases in Korea. We applied various techniques such as creation of stream reservoirs, retreat of the embankment, restoration of floodplain, and also we removed some of embankment. This is my final conclusions. The Korea, we recently developed various systems and policies to expand and apply nature-based solutions to water management, including flood management. Especially on this, my final conclusions, I want to focus on mobilization of finance to nature-based solutions. Recently, we transferred the national finance related water management to a local government. And then we are using the private resources for small-scale development project. And then also we are applying the national and local government resources by obligating the application of NBS to water management. So this is my final conclusions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing those very interesting experiences from Korea and for sticking to time. Now I would like to invite our second speaker, Dr. Hirotaro Matsuki, from the International Center for Water Hazard and Risk Management in Japan, to talk about Japanese traditional river engineering as a nature-based solution. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Good evening, everybody, all participants for this wonderful session on nature-based solution. I am Matsuki speaking from Aicham, Japan. I am happy to have a chance to introduce Japanese traditional river engineering. This technique has time-honored reasonability, legal framework, and governmental intentions. At first, I'd ask you to look at the picture on the left side. This is a series of drawings protecting an important dike of Niodo River in Japan. Then check the image on the right side from Vietnam. Country, river scale and flood discharge are different, but the two structures have a same engineering theory. I call it waterfall theory, learned from Japanese old textbook written in 19th century. The key concept is moderate water by water, like a waterfall basin. which mitigate kinetic energy of falling water by its water pool. The groins are generating a flow focus point and turning flat flow away from the riverbank to be protected. The groin technique are also used for biodiversity. This picture shows you a river rehabilitation project aiming both flood control and environmental preservation. In Japan, we are promoting nature-oriented riverworks to create and preserve sound circumstances for riparian people and water ecosystem. Then, today I want to explain that the nature-oriented riverworks based the river law of Japan. The law was established in 1896, over 100 years ago, for flood control in Asian monsoon region. During economic growth in 1964, the law was amended to allocate limited water resources for various social sectors. In 1997, facing and regulating negative impacts on the nature, the law was amended again to cover environmental preservation and rehabilitation. And now, the river managers and voluntary engineers in Japan are planning and conducting river maintenance for the three purposes as flood control, water resources management, and nature preservation. In this context, I would consider additional matter, sustainability. Sustainability of the nature-oriented riverworks as a nature-based solution. It is quite understandable we should harness natural powers to harmonize with people's activities. To do so, we are trying to develop a cultural and participatory approach as one of quality infrastructures. One more thing, today I would stress the importance of the routine repairability to design sustainability. From my experience, three components are indispensable, namely local materials, affordable cost, and locally residing experts. These are all of my presentation. I hope to discuss more nature-based solutions and consider together sustainable watershed management under changing climate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. And we obviously have a lot to learn from Japan that has been working with nature for a very long time. So now I would like to invite Matthijs Bo, who is the founding principal of One Architecture and Urbanism, and he's from the Netherlands.
Thank you very much, Anna. I want to start with pointing to a book that we've made together with the EcoShape consortium in the Netherlands, which focuses on building with nature. And the EcoShape consortium is a consortium of dredgers, engineers, not-for-profits, scientists who collaborate on what we call building with nature, where the idea is to move from building against nature, groins and levees, to building with nature for hydrological engineering projects. And this is an example in the Netherlands where we've strengthened the dune system by a sand depletion, reducing the overall cost over 50 years by about 100 million. But what I'd like to do is we've at the consortium have a lot of experience now with these type of projects, focus on one particular projects in Indonesia, and talk a bit more about the lessons that we have learned. In Indonesia, we have been working on a project on the north coast of Java, which, as you know, is subsiding heavily in the regency of Demak. And here you see the current state of the infrastructure caused by subsidence and less protected, of course, because of mangrove loss. And what we've been doing with the Building with Nature program, together with our local partners, is develop a project for about 10 miles of coastline in which we constructed bamboo fences together with the local population, which helped capture the sediment so that ground is being gained in order for mangroves to grow and strengthen the mangrove belt along this coast. And of course, you know that mangroves have multiple benefits. They not only help with carbon sequestration, they attenuate waves and thus protect the villages around it, but they also are nurseries for a lot of different species. And in this particular project, it's that latter component which has proven to be really important. This is an image from the book in which we explain how the mangrove fences, the bamboo fences work. They, as you see in the second image from the left, they trap sediment, basically elevating the ground enough for mangroves to start settling in. And this has been proven to be very successful. We have seen a lot of different ecosystem benefits, as I've already talked about, but we also have seen a lot of economic benefits because they help not only protect the agriculture behind the mangrove belt, but as the nurseries, they also very much increase the yields of the different fisheries that we that people are using there. And with our scientists and the scientific institutions, we've done a lot of monitoring after the fact, and we've discovered that specifically the mangrove-based economical benefits are significant and far outweigh the initial cost of this project that has been funded by bilateral funding and through EcoShape. And these benefits don't even include all the indirect benefits from coastal protection, biodiversity, tourism and recreation, the timber projects that we can get, and the carbon sequestration. Key to the success of this was the activation of the local population in the construction of these measures, as well as in the maintenance of these measures, as well as in the economic operation of the fisheries. One of the key parts was that we created coastal schools in which we worked together with the local population to really reap the benefits of this work. And that's, I think, what I like to be the main point. The organization that we set up, which was EcoShape and Wetlands, together with knowledge partners in the Netherlands, as well as knowledge partners in Indonesia, the communities and the coastal field schools, was really key to the success of this project. And we find now that when replicating this project, that is the key element for success. If we don't put these social structures in place, if we don't collaborate as intimately, we often see new projects degrade. And so the lessons that we have learned is that of course, we want to use the natural dynamics to deal with the future uncertainties. It's really important that we proactively and early work on stakeholder engagement, work on a broad range of benefits, have multiple financing streams. The institutional collaboration and the political willingness is great, and learning by doing, but all this work, of course, is really critical. One last point, we are so happy with this success that EcoShape is collaborating on a new program called Building with Nature Asia, in which we are now scaling and replicating these type of approaches in 5 more countries in Asia, with a multitude of projects, not only in coastal environments, but also in riverine and lake-oriented environments. That's where I stop. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Peter, for these very interesting experiences working with mangroves as an NBS and also with the local populations in Asia. We will come back to some of these issues during the discussion. Now I would like to invite the next speaker, who is Dr. Peter Bach from the Department of Urban Water Management at the Swiss Federal Institute of Aquatic Science and Technology. Please, Peter.
Thank you very much. Just getting this going. All right. So my approach or my talk today is somewhat different, where we're actually looking at how we can then guide the early stages of planning nature-based solutions and incorporating them into architectural designs, and then how this actually led us to then test out the way of thinking and to teach the way of thinking in the broader environmental engineering education as well. And it really revolves around this one study, which is in Bern. It's a very small site on the base of the river, the main river Aare, and it was being redeveloped. And a few of us, we were approached by some architectural studios to see how we can use some of the tools that we have and the knowledge we have around nature-based solutions to guide the design process. So just a bit about that. So it was a very interesting, lengthy discussion with architects, and they have a very different way of looking at this idea of humans and nature, and are transitioning more towards trying to incorporate nature much more actively back into their designs. And so when we went through all the different options that we had, small scale, large scale, nature-based solutions, we kind of ended up with a kind of revitalization and laissez-faire approach. Just to show you a bit about how that sort of ended up looking like. And this was supported by a lot of high-level modeling of different connectivity aspects, but also very fine-scale modeling. We ended up deciding to leave a lot of the greening in the site and protect that the natural capital on the site for biodiversity reasons, but also for that lush livability reasons. The design itself then focused on a number of key elements where we could see how certain kinds of water management or biodiversity improvement strategies could be linked within the actual structure. So when we came up with the actual design, we used things like urban heat models to support the placement of very small scale systems to help retain water within the environment. And this, for example, led to shaping the urban form in the existing area so that we could protect the natural areas within the site, using nature itself to try and remediate legacy issues, because this used to be an industrial site, and being able to close the cycle of rainwater as well to help maintain these spaces, and at the same time keeping the existing forested areas within the development, and making sure that the development itself was not just good for nature but also for the human dimension as well. And so what was interesting about this whole process is not only having to go beyond one single discipline and think about how they look at nature and humans in the process, but to be able to, as engineers, and I'm being a trained engineer, to be able to then bridge these disciplines together, architectural thinking, urban ecology, as well as urban design. And so this experience, which I went through fairly quickly, became a very interesting opportunity for us to then teach the same ideas and the same approach, going from a very broader scale urban regional thinking to a local scale site-based approach to our students who took a master course in advanced water resources that my colleague Darcy and I planned. We gave them this particular case study and allowed them to really go wild and think about what they could possibly do within the design of the site. And so we had 5 different groups which we guided throughout the different weeks in shaping this development, giving them a bit of insights from an architectural perspective, from an urban ecology perspective, so that they know based on other case studies what is out there in terms of nature-based solutions. And what was very exciting to see was that they came up with very unique and very interesting solutions for the sites that was not only based on the fundamentals that they learn as engineers and some of the fundamental aspects of planning that they are taught in the course, but also just generally their own uniqueness to the style. And so training and teaching these skills, I think, is very critical as we head into the future in trying to get these kinds of solutions into practice. And so some lessons learned, both from the experience in the field, but also in the classroom, we can see that the architectural design is often one of the earlier roles that we need to target in the shaping of these outcomes and in getting nature-based solutions into the dialogue very early. This is an interdisciplinary dialogue, but can be supported by a lot of data and computational analysis that scientists and engineers and other researchers around the world are really looking at. And it's really about evidence-based support, being able to demonstrate that the solutions can work and that they can provide a number of different benefits that acts as a bridge from research to practice. But one thing is for sure, we definitely have a paradigm shift. People are really opening up to thinking across these disciplines, and we call it nature-based solutions, but in other disciplines, they are using very similar terms. And if we can take a lot of these experiences from the field, bring them into the classroom and back into the real world, then I think we can definitely create some real impact. So if you want to know a bit more about it, you can feel free to get in touch, but I'll leave it there and looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you very much, Peter, and for introducing us now to NBS in the urban environment and in urban design. And I think that the next presentation is going to provide more details on this type of issues. So I'll invite Laila Luti, who is a project assistant in research and technology at the Zurich University of Applied Sciences, to continue the presentation from Switzerland.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm pleased to present today the technical and conceptual implementation of nature-based solution in inhabited buildings with a special focus on user experience. Resource depletion, climate change, and degradation of ecosystems are challenges faced by cities worldwide and will increase if cities do not adapt. In order to tackle those challenges, it is necessary to transform our cities into sustainable systems using a holistic approach. One element in achieving this transition is the implementation of nature-based solutions. In our definition, NBS are solutions that allow a circular system of nutrients and resources in the urban biosphere, leading to sustainable and resilient urban environments. Today, we will focus on two application examples where we installed NBS. On the left side, we have the Kreishaus. Kreishaus stands for Climate and Resource Efficient Sufficiency House. The Kreishaus is built and operated by ZHW as a living lab. It makes a climate neutral, ecological, and sufficiency living tangible and tests innovation in practice. In addition, user feedback is used for technology development. Fels 2 on the other side is a multi-family house which fulfills high demands on economical and ecological building. In total, 16 micro-apartments were created by reconstruction. Fels 2 was built and maintained by local architects, where ZHW and Alchemia Nova assisted with ideas and monitoring. Now we will take first a closer look at Kreishaus. Kreishaus pursues the following goals, with, for example, urine evaporation, water treatment, worm composting, and roof gardening. Closed water, nutrient, and material cycles are achieved. The building is constructed with natural reused, long-lasting, or recyclable materials. At the end of its life, the building is fully degradable or recyclable, and all aspects of sustainability are to be integrated architecturally. Today, we will only have time to focus on the water cycle in Kreishaus. In the picture, we can see the water cycle, which is completely self-sufficient and does not need any freshwater connection. The rainwater is physically processed into drinking water. Rainwater is fed from the roof into the rainwater tank and passes first through a sediment filter, then through activated carbon, and at the end through the UVC disinfection. After the water is used, it ends up as grey water in the tanks under the house. The heart of greywater purification is the biological filter. The biological filter is based on a moving bed filter made of biochips. The surface of the chips is overgrown by biofilm, which binds and metabolizes the dissolved impurities. The purified water is then used as irrigation in the roof garden. The biological filter box is a result of many years of research at ZW. Based on the principle of constructed wetlands, the first aquaponic plants and biopools were built on our university. Through further research, the first box for greywater purification without plants but with biofilm could be developed. The third prototype is now tested in Kreisas, and we are trying to continuously improving the filter box. In the picture, we can see the As already mentioned, the Kreisas is a living lab and allows for experiments and adaptations. However, I would now like to introduce you to a multi-family house that is permanently inhabited and is located in the middle of Zurich. In Fels 2, the greywater is purified by a constructed wetland. The greywater is fed to a planted filter. The root network in the substrate generates the necessary filtering effect. The further cleaning effect is generated by the metabolism of the microorganisms living in the substrate. In this way, impurities are used as plant nutrients. After purification, the water is available again for toilet flushing and garden watering. This relieves the public sewage system by at least 35%. Now I will briefly tell you something about the research we do. The aim of our research is to develop efficient plants. These are to be tested for various parameters during operation. Parameters are, for example, hygienic parameters, but also energy and water balance. Through socio-economic research, we aim to promote public acceptance of new technology. The socio-economic results are still being processed. They are collected through questionnaires and user feedback from people who stay in the Kreishaus. The following evaluations provide initial insights. We can see that the majority of respondents would implement treatment of rainwater to freshwater treatment for themselves. They would also like to reuse water from bathroom and kitchen and could imagine to use it for watering the home garden. Additionally, the vast majority do not fear health risk from implementing water and nutrient treatment. Now I'll come to the conclusion. The two projects shown that the technical and conceptual implementation of NBS in inhabited building is possible and works well. And in its first impression, it is accepted by the inhabitants. The bigger problem is still the respective permits from the authorities, as well as policy and framework, which is not clear and supportive yet. We hope that new scientific findings and increasing pressure to act against climate change are making NBS more and more important. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much from these examples, also from the inhabited environment where NBS can play a role. And now I would like to introduce Mathilde Lowry from the French Water Partnership. She works for the French Biodiversity Agency, where she coordinates the Life Artisan European project on nature-based solutions for climate adaptation.
Hello, I'm very happy to be here. So the French Biodiversity Agency is part of the French Water Partnership. I'm very happy to be here to present how the project is aiming at reinforce NBS for climate change adaptation in France. So, sorry, it's long. Sorry for my computer, it's quite low because of the heat in the room. So France, as you know, is impacted strongly by sorry for that. My presentation, perhaps you can change because my presentation just collapse. So I suggest we go to the other participants.
Or maybe we have somebody who can upload it for you. I also have some, limitations with my computer. Do we have somebody from the World Water
So
Week.
my assistant can upload your presentation documents. So Tsunemune-san.
Sorry, I will try again. Okay. Sorry for that technical issue. It's quite hot in the room. I don't know if it's related to that. I reopened the presentation. Anyway, France is impacted by climate change. We estimate that 62% of French population is strongly impacted by climate change. And specifically for water, we have a lot of floods and droughts. And more specifically this summer, we faced very high droughts as many other European countries. And 2/3 of our departments were classified as high risk of water scarcity. So we are really, really strongly impacted by climate change.
Excuse me for intervening. Yumiko, could your assistant upload the presentation?
Yeah, I'm asking.
Here it is.
Okay. Sorry, so can you go to the second and third, please? Very sorry for that. But watershed are not only impacted by climate change, but also by biodiversity loss. It is impacted from upstream to downstream. And to tackle these both issues for water, climate and biodiversity, we decided to work on NBS. So please go to the next slide, please. And why NBS? We use the IUCN standard for NBS, and we use it because in our concern, NBS are really avoiding maladaptation because it stores carbon. So we avoid creating more greenhouse gas. It's also based on human well-being and participatory process. So we can then fight against social inequalities. And it is also aiming at having biodiversity benefits. So we are fighting biodiversity loss. Because I recall the IUCN definition is actions that protect, sustainably manage, or restore ecosystems. And this is really the definition we apply in our project. Next slide, please. So the French government has adopted a national climate change adaptation plan, the second one, which focus strongly on NBS, reinforcing NBS wherever it is efficient. And that's why we, as French Biodiversity Agency, we are piloting this artisan project, which is aiming at developing NBS at the whole French level, including overseas territories. And we do that within 3 main actions: implementing NBS at the local level. So we have 10 pilot sites. Most of them are very closely related to the projects presented by the other participants, riverside or mangroves or in urban cities. Then we have a strong emphasis at the regional level with 14 regional facilitators that are aiming at developing, communicating and about NBS. And also at national level, we are creating a lot of resources and tools to support project owners. So at the next slide, please. So at the watershed level, we have different types of pilot sites. First, upstream, we have pilot sites that create buffer humid zone or restoring existing humid zone but non-functional, or even restoring upstream river basin in order to improve and increase the flow of the rivers in the summer. Specifically in Brittany, we have a lot of droughts and we are restoring these upstream watersheds. Then at the agricultural field, we are also restoring hedgerows in order to fight against erosion, soil erosion, floods, and also droughts. We have also, so this is in Normandy, the others are in south of France, Brittany, and near Paris. We are also working in cities and more specifically at schoolyard levels, or even to fight against rainwater, working with green trees that are collecting rainwaters and are creating a small ecosystem to fight against also heat islands. And we are also working downstreams with mangrove restoration in a way very similar to the one what was presented earlier in Java. Next slide, please. And what we have really, the main challenges we faced during the first phase of the project, we did a lot of studies, and we faced many issues in order to mainstream water-related NBS for climate change adaptation in France. First, we need more and more awareness raising and knowledge sharing. That's why we are working on the NBS plea for climate change adaptation in order to put right figures and to make people decide to invest in NBS instead of in gray infrastructure, or combine NBS and gray infrastructure. So we are ongoing our production of resources. Also networking. Networking is very important. It was also mentioned earlier, to connect people from different disciplines and to have a holistic approach is very important. That's why we are connecting sciences and society also. And we are monitoring our 10 pilot sites to make sure we have biodiversity gain, to make sure we have a participatory process, to make sure we are really fighting against climate change. Then we also have a lot of support for project owners in terms of capacity building, training, and also financing. The main financiers for water in France are the water agencies, but we are also using European national or regional funds, and also private fundings, which is increasing for this type of project. And then we also work on the third national adaptation plan to make sure that NBS and all these regulation and legislation levers are really used in this third NAP. Next slide, please.
You need to wrap up. Okay.
Yeah, so the key messages is really to work for climate and biodiversity together. And that means that first we need to protect existing ecosystems. This is the main efficient NBS, is the ecosystems already existing and which are functional. And then we need a paradigm shift to shift from gray infrastructure to NBS. The scale is very important, and the watershed scale, the river basin scale, is very interesting for that, because we can work on solidarity between upstream and downstream users. Then one hazard can be tackled by different NBS, and one NBS can tackle different hazards. And the last message is NBS is not only a technical solution, it's a real project, which is important upstream phases and consultation. Thank you very much, and sorry for the technical issues.
No problem. We are actually still within time, and thanks for highlighting also many of the cool benefits of NBS, both for the environment and the socioeconomic benefits. So now I'd like to invite our next speaker from the Danish Water Forum, Professor Karsten Arnebjerg Nielsen from the Danish Technical University.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. What I'm going to present today is building on top of what the other presenters have already said. So there are many obvious reasons to go into nature-based solutions. So it's really a surprise that not everyone is exploring their potential. But we still see a lack of how they're being adopted. And a lot of that is due to probably differences and uncertainties, and that we have so many benefits that it's difficult to find one where they are really much better than the others. So therefore, while we're simply perhaps having too many baselines, and that's what we're trying to find a way in the project Reconnect and in Denmark together with the Danish Water Forum. I'm presenting here a little bit of two PhD students' work, Martina Vitti and Julie Skustrup. So I'm their main supervisor. And we're doing that based on a small project in Aarhus, where they have made two artificial nature-based solutions, both of them to reduce pluvial flood risk. So, and the idea is, what is the value to the area what is the value to the people that live in these areas? So before there was inaccessible farming in one part and just grass field in the other. So what is the value that they have gotten out of this? And that is the answer we want to explore. And how can we put that in a tangible measure that is as good as any other economic assessment? First, to Julie's work, we have looked at a number of European studies where we say, okay, actually people are willing to pay more when they live close to a nature-based solution like kind of thing. And we find especially that there are three variables that are important in this regard. One of them is population density, where we see that the more dense we are, the more are people willing to pay for actually having access to a green space. Traveling distance, some correlation, but probably a little bit too fussy to take into account. I should say the y-axis is the willingness to pay, and that is on a log scale. And then we have the size of the location, and that actually also has a very high uncertainty. Still, in the end, we can come up with a value, and we can see here that actually the value of such an area is quite substantial. So these are European-based values saying that we actually have something like 110,000 euros per hectare per year if we just have a 1 hectare study. The marginal value decreases, of course, the absolute value increases as we go beyond. So there is a substantial amount of value created to the people around the area when we are developing an NBS. One thing that concerns me is the huge variation. So the figures that I showed you before was showing that there was an immense amount of uncertainty in this regard. Can we know something more about this? I think there are two main ways of doing this. We can know more about the differences between locations. So is it a place that's good for making human activities, sailing, various kinds of games, sleeping, whatever, benches? That's one way to go. We've found some interesting PhD studies from the US mainly that focuses on that. What we want to do is more to say, what is the value of the people? So who in the neighborhood is it that is actually benefiting from having these values? And I'm just showing some preliminary results of a study that we did on where we went out and surveyed something like 600 people in the area and asked them, what are your preferences? What are you willing to pay for such an area? And who are you, by the way? So these are the, I should say, preliminary findings. We're going to validate that against other European sites. But it seems that people who are very attracted towards nature-based solutions are people that are slightly old. They are, in general, they have a high income or they live in an expensive housing area. So combining that with some of them being retired, I think it is people that are fairly well off. They want to be living close to the area. And actually a somewhat surprising result was that even though we asked for the recreational value, a lot of them actually put a very high emphasis on the nature for nature stakes, so biodiversity, and not necessarily needing to have access to all of the areas that are NBS, knowing that if there are restricted areas, then probably the biodiversity there is bigger. Somewhat surprisingly, these two NBSs were both built in an area that had experienced floods recently. But the concern about flood risk was actually lower than the average. And then children in the household, people need to out and do something with their children. And obviously the NBS is a suitable place to do activities. So where we want to go with this is just conclusions, perhaps some points of discussion. Even though we've done such a survey, there's still a large uncertainty, even though it's of course smaller than before. Then I think there are some interesting issues here. So should we build NBS in rich areas so that we're making rich areas even more better for the people living in those areas, or should we? How do we distribute this? How do we use this kind of information? How do we ensure that other people also start to gain from having NBS? And then also, I still think that even though there are some examples here, we still need to ensure that this information, when it's becoming more tangible, that it's also entered into a suitable decision-making process so that we can actually gain something, not only having a, should we say, a soft discussion, but also having hard discussions on when, where, and how much we should implement NBS, because we need it more than we have, but how much is good. So with this, I want to thank my presentation, and thanks for listening.
Thank you very much for bringing up these issues about ethics and equity and NBS for whom. So now we have come to our final presentation, and I would like to invite Dr. Juri Mannuksela, who is from the Natural Resource Institute of Finland. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Anna. I will share my experiences about project that we did in Morocco in extreme dry condition, and pointing out the importance of trees for protecting us and protecting agriculture. And of course, the trees, they require plenty of water, and that's we need to point out importance of water services. And also we did this study in the dry areas since we didn't want to use agricultural lands. And our institute has like over 100 years experiments of forest research. So we applied this to very hot conditions, because in Finland we have used to cultivate and to do our agriculture in very, very cold temperatures. So we are very familiar with the extreme temperatures and extreme climate conditions. And I think this could be beneficial in many cases in the future projects. So we did a 3-year study in Morocco with the local university, Mohammed VI Polytechnic. And then this study was financed by a Nordic energy company, ST1. And research site was in Marrakesh area, semi-arid conditions. And the aim of this study was to maximize the carbon capture in dry climate. So we tried 7 tree species, acacia, carob, eucalyptus, moringa, pistacia, paulownia, and pine. We did a relatively small pilot, like 3 hectares altogether in 2 different environmental conditions. And then 8,000 seedlings were digged out and measured. And then we also altered soil just to adapt more water and improve the soil retention. And we did a different kind of irrigation, drip irrigation, tank irrigation, and no irrigation at all. And these were directed from Finland by Professor Hannu Ilvesniemi, and we have a local postdoc in Mohammed VI Polytechnic, Luja Metoi. And he did very excellent job for us in this study. So there's a picture about the other experimental field, how we altered the soil conditions and water conditions. We did this different irrigation and no irrigation at all. And then we modified the soil by mixing 20% of peat. Then we also altered the amount of the biochar, and then not to do nothing at all. And then we mixed the peat and biochar in the different relations. for these areas, we just planted these 7 trees. So there's very many different kind of conditions. And the results that we learned from this experiment, that more water we gave to these seedlings, the more they growed. So that was the main effect. But then also when we altered the soil condition, it has like a noticeable effect for the tree growth. And then fast growing trees like eucalyptus, they're growing very fast. So we were able to increase quite a huge amount of biomass in dry conditions. And we could use like trees that are not very safe in normal conditions. But in the dry conditions, once we stop irrigation, the trees will die, and it's not safe. It's not an endanger in the local environment. So then we also tested these local plants, and they were almost only ones that survived without irrigation. And also what we learned that all local operations were essential. And we started like a discussion on the ministry level, and then we came back to like a research level, and then this approach was very suitable. But then regarding the water, then the sustainable and safe water resource is a key element. We cannot use the local groundwater because the level is decreasing like 1 meter per year. And then we should use wastewater or then purified seawater so that we are not disturbing the local water resources. And then we could also think about how we are going forward from these experiments. From these pilot experiments, we should go in larger scale demo scale experiments in the dry areas. So what we are now doing is sharing the experiments, starting to cooperate with you and together with Finnish Water Forum. And we look local and global players, and we are acting on the dry areas. So what we try to do is just to, with the help of trees, to get the green cover that gives the shading, but it also controls the floodwaters. And also it's possible to create like artificial water pockets and artificial groundwater from purified seawater or wastewater, and that would help water management. So altogether, these trees, they are protecting, but also they are capturing the carbon. And while they are living, they are capturing the carbon, but then they could be used as building elements, for example, protecting floods when we cut them down. Thank you. That was my share of this speak.
Thank you very much for these interesting experiences from Morocco. Now we have the panel discussion. We have about 20 minutes. So all the presenters will be on the panel, and I'll kick it off with some questions. And please try to provide as short answers as possible, so all of you have a chance to say something. So then I would like to come back to the purpose with this session. It was to look at how we can overcome trade-off challenges to scale up NBS. And now we have heard a lot about all the positive aspects of NBS, not so much actually about trade-offs and if there are any negative consequences. So maybe I will start with asking Peter and Laila from Switzerland how they look at this, in the urban environment. What are the major trade-offs that need to be considered and overcome to scale up NBS in that kind of environment?
That's a very good question. Laila, do you want to go first, or shall I go first?
No, go first.
Okay. I guess one of the key trade-offs is at the moment we're still, and this is what I'm noticing in the design and engagement process. We're still seeing humans and nature as this conflicting kind of situation. So, when we were trying to design the area and we were trying to put in the nature-based solutions, it was a space conflict. And people, I think, have yet to really understand that, we can integrate nature into our daily lives, into our lifestyles. And this was a bit of a hurdle that we faced when our design was judged by the city of Bern. And in discussions with them, it sort of, it became pretty apparent that there's still this dichotomy of humans versus nature. And I think when we start to evolve this practice and we can start to demonstrate how, lifestyle changes and living with nature more can actually, remove this perception, and then I think we can start overcoming this potential hurdle and people will start to look at things. I think that was probably the most prominent aspect that showed from it.
Okay, thanks. Laila, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's you're right, Peter. And from my side, also the biggest problem is the lack of acceptance, or just rather the changing of the habitat from the person. So it's really hard to adapt. But I think, Peter, you just said correctly.
Okay, then if we look at the trade-offs more at the watershed scale, in the rural environment, what are the key trade-offs that need to be overcome there to scale up all the good practices we have seen? Anybody who would like to start on that? We have many presenters talking about rural environment and watersheds. Now I can't see you all any longer.
Okay, I can go first while you find the best one.
Yeah.
Carsten Arnbjerg from DCU. I think Peter nails it very nicely, and that is regardless of space, of scale, in the sense that it's a fight for space. Decision makers want taxpayers. They don't, and trees are bad taxpayers. So the main conflict here is between what do people call bankable and what is not bankable. And we need to find ways of saying, well, perhaps this is not bankable on the very short term, but on the longer term it is. And I'm sure that in the upscaling, in the project that we are part of, bankability is going to be part of how we look at upscaling. How can we make strategies, procedures that enable people to make bankability? And part of that may be taxation of the people who are living close to the nature-based solutions who are benefiting from it. And perhaps then we go back to the ethics discussion, and then it's the old people who actually should pay most because, well, they can afford it.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. And now I see two raised hands here. We start with Matsuki from Japan.
Thank you. So now we are discussing this matter in the session for watershed management. I explained the river engineering of Japan. We are starting the watershed management from flood control because of the heavy and frequent flood damages. Then in this stage of climate change, Japan shifted the policy to river basin management, inviting all stakeholders. Yeah, led by Japanese government and flood control authority and agriculture and rural political leaders, rural governors. I propose to remind that the importance of the river basin management. That's my comment for solve the trade-off problem.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Then I can see also Mathilde from France has raised her hand.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, one of the main trade-off, I think, is related to the one already mentioned about space, and it's more specifically in France related to land ownership. When we want to restore a humid zone or a river basin upstream, usually it's from agricultural lands, but the one benefiting from this restoration or preservation are the one downstream. So there is a link with how we share the value of the NBS and the costs. So it is linked also to the business model of this NBS in a sense. Then other trade-off are the time. Usually people or like city councils, if they are facing flood, they want to react and to show to their population they are acting, so they will build a dike. And if you want to restore a humid zone upstream, it takes more time. And then the feeling of being protected is also different. So it's really also a paradigm shift from, as it was already mentioned by Matisse, from living against nature and living with nature. It's a real, even psychological or spiritual shift in a sense also.
Okay, thanks. And now I think Matisse has also raised his hand, so maybe he wants to continue that reasoning.
Yeah, and I'd like to go a bit more into the topic of bankability. What we've seen in Java very much is that it's only after these projects have realized that you can start monitoring its effects. And many of these nature-based solutions, and we've seen that today, are still in a sort of piloting phase. And I feel that the weight on bankability is a priori is very difficult for replication and scaling. I think we're still in the phase where we just need to do this work and invest in it, because whenever we monitor afterwards, like we have seen in Java, the effects are very, very positive. And so I feel that putting an economic lens on it makes the replication and the scalability more difficult. And so we should monitor it. We should bring our scientists to help us evaluate, but to ask for bankable projects a priori is not going to help do this important work and scale it globally.
Okay, thanks. I guess it also depends on what we value, you know, when we develop bankable projects. Peter, did you want to come in again?
Yeah, just a quick addition to it, just to throw another piece of complexity into the puzzle. And you know, we've seen large-scale nature-based solutions, and we've seen small-scale nature-based solutions. We've seen examples of floods, biodiversity, and all sorts of stuff. I guess we also have to keep in the back of our heads that nature does not respect administrative boundaries, and this just complicates the whole bankability issue even more. And when we look at a biodiversity network compared to a flood risk map, compared to urban heat and wind patterns, these are all going to be somewhat different to each other. They may follow some physical principles, but the whole situation may look completely different. And so I think understanding, first of all, getting a holistic picture, and then understanding even these interactions will give us a way towards maybe quantifying this bankability, or at least making arguments for it. But it is a complexity I think we have to embark on if we want to create credibility. So I just wanted to add that piece of complexity to the puzzle.
Yeah. And I also think, we need to look at the upstream and downstream linkages, and who benefits from what and pays for what. Now I can see Juri from Finland here also.
Yes, I see that if we want to upscale this kind of proposition that we have heard today, we have to think about, for example, how much floodwater is causing damages and how much is lowering the value of the apartments. So we should have some kind of investment tax or collected from the houses. But at the same time, if you think about areas around the cities, we should build like a protective tree barriers, and then we should probably collect the money from the fossil industry, because it's an industry that has been mainly caused these climate changes. And I did a very quick calculation. If we invest about 1/10 of the value of fossil fuel industry for planting trees, it would balance the carbon dioxide emissions that fossil fuel industry is causing. So we have to go for the sources and who is benefiting about this upscaling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks a lot. Now I can't see any more raised hands. So maybe we should move on to another question. Actually, I wanted to discuss financing, but we have already touched on that topic, how financing to nature-based solutions could be scaled up through different mechanisms. I don't know if there is anything you would like to add to that, to what has already been said. No? Then maybe we should move, to the issue of stakeholder participation, maybe especially when working at the watershed scale, how to involve local indigenous communities in the dialogue and design of NBS, making sure that they also benefit and not only perhaps downstream urban populations. I think we saw some experiences, both from Indonesia and maybe Morocco and other places. Marchis, do you have?
Yeah, I can talk a bit about that. I can talk in detail, of course, about the Java project, but within the EcoShape consortium, I think what was really critical that in addition to the scientists and the engineers and the dredgers and maybe the designers, and NGOs like Wetlands International became part of the consortium, because they started to put a very different lens on these type of projects. They have connections on the ground there in all these different countries, working with local populations and creating sort of this, on the one hand, the stewardship of these projects, but also making sure that the economic benefits for these local populations are maximized. And for the EcoShape consortium, which was originally rather technical, bringing that on board has been a game changer. And we all know about this, right? That these physical and social systems need to be connected, but doing that is so critical. And at the same time, so difficult. So I would urge everyone to bring that lens into their NBS work.
Okay, thanks a lot. I have a message here that there are 2 questions in the chat. I am not able to find them right now. Could someone else maybe read out those questions?
Well, I can try. The first one was actually the first topic we talked about. So Angela put it this way: I would like to know what the steps you think are necessary to really go beyond pilots and upscale and go towards upscaling. So I think that is what we discussed first. And then the second is close to what you said. So the Indonesian example of indigenous and traditional knowledge, how is that taken into account when designing interventions with the bamboo fences? So a little bit more specific on that.
Mm-hmm. But it seems we have almost addressed those questions, right?
You asked me to.
Yes.
And there is a third one.
Third one, could you read it out?
Yes, NBS are becoming very popular, and I use also for greenwashing, e.g. private sector actors promote planting trees but create monoculture. How can we avoid this? This is the third question.
Okay. Anybody who would like to address that?
Well, I can try. It is a risk we have foreseen, and that's why we decided in our partnership, we are 28, to use IUCN standards on NBS, because I think that there are a lot of safeguards to avoid this kind of NBS greenwashing, because there are this objective of being positive for biodiversity. So this is very important. And then monoculture is not positive for biodiversity. And then also this point of benefiting the population. And then you have a lot of 28 criteria and indicators, quite difficult to answer, to be honest. But we are really trying to focus and to use this standard while we are supervising the 10 pilot sites, and also when we are providing funds, either from water agencies or from other national or even private sector. We are really trying to use this standard to avoid greenwashing. And this is also the objective of IUCN International. We are developing now some training about this standard, so that it's not still a label, but probably in some few years, there's going to be a label to make sure that private sectors are not using this term for greenwashing.
Okay, thanks. I see more hands raised here. We start with Peter again.
Yeah, I guess two pieces of anecdotes from two different countries. I mean, in Switzerland, for example, now we're really embarking on this idea of nature-based solutions, sponge cities, whatever you want to call it, and people are still uncertain as to how they should be doing it. And yes, there's always the risk of greenwashing. And I've seen some examples in Zurich where you see a private owner turn their land into some green fancy place. Whether it actually works or not has yet to be tested or to be monitored. I think, we need to sort of balance between, first of all, allowing them to take these initiatives, but then have set guidance, whether it's through an organization or through best practice manuals, which in Switzerland, there are technically two of them that were published recently for heat and for water management, to have those then guide and really bring in someone from a higher level organization to sort of support that process. And this has sort of been done in Australia to a certain extent. So that's the second example I'm offering, where in Melbourne you have the Melbourne Water Authority that in a way takes charge and gives that guidance, as well as also approvals of planning processes. And I think without those kinds of structures in place, you will run the risk in the long future of people just ticking boxes and greenwashing as a result of that. So I think you need a bit of it at the start to get the initiatives going, but then you kind of need to then slowly put in some control structures to really make sure it's managed and done properly.
Okay, so guidance and technical standards. Yuri, what do you have to say about this?
Yes, I don't see that greenwashing is totally bad. It is like a first step to the right direction. I think that we should utilize that companies start to think about the environment, and then as they do greenwashing in the beginning, but that can lead to the better actions. And for example, if we start to are cultivating, for example, a lot of trees and massive amounts, then of course the amount of greenwashing would be very small. So mainly if you are doing the beneficial actions by tree plantations, then greenwashing become a smaller phenomena. But I would say that it is good to start from somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Then we have Karsten.
Yes, I think we are a little too much aligned here, so I'll spread a bit of this discomfort between us, perhaps. First of all, greenwashing, I agree with the others, and I'll put it slightly different. If we cannot have anything else in demos, then we cannot say what is greenwashing and what is not. So we need some standards, we need some upscaling. And I think then we have the dilemma of we have to work transdisciplinary on this. The architects want something new and unique every time. The engineers want something that's standardized and very concrete and where we have very tangible indicators. And the urban planners want something that's in between, and they want something that is very soft and yet touches upon both the upscaling and the uniqueness. And I think we need to balance these needs and ensure that this is met when we make our new kinds of standards that actually allow for upscaling of NBS, so that we can be unique, yes, but we also need a lot of standardization. We can be soft, but yes, we also need some tangible decision and enabling indicators like economic costs, etc. And I think that's where we are, and I think I may have offended somebody here, and apologies in advance for that. But I think we need this dilemma and saying, what is the different standards? What is it that we're training our different professions to look at when we make decisions and when we promote various measures?
Thanks a lot. Then the last input here from the panel, well, will be from Matsuki, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I want to stress the importance of the local governance. We had a Asia Pacific Water Summit in last April, and I convened the water and environment session. One conclusion is that the leadership of local governance. We should prepare invitation for local governance, and we should foster the leadership of the local governance. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now, it's 14:19. We have 1 minute left, but we can go over for a few minutes. So I think I want to conclude the panel discussion and thank all the panelists for sharing their insights into these issues related to nature-based solutions. I'm not going to try to make a comprehensive summary, just to say that nature-based solutions seems to be both an old and a new topic. In Japan, they've been working with this since 1800s. At the same time, it is new in the way we are using it today, so more guidance and standards are needed to scale up good practices. And I think that these kinds of events and dialogues that we are having now will contribute to that. And I hope that it will continue also at future meetings, and that we will be able also to see some reports and follow up things coming out from this. So I think with those words, I hand over to you, Yumiko, who will close the session.
So Anna, thank you so much for kindly moderating this, session, which is a diverse case study from Europe, Japan, Asia, and Morocco. And I also thank you for all presenters kindly making your sharing valuable case studies and also actively joining panel discussion. That is very, very useful. I heard NowNet is turned to the 20 years for establishment. So it is grateful if we can kindly share all these case studies continuously, then we can make the flagship document about the case study to promote nature-based solution solving the issue. That is my suggestion for next step. So thank you so much for all audience to kindly choosing our session. And we are also looking forward to hearing your feedback, comment, or case studies which you would like to share to us. So work together for nature-based solution for valuing water and for water security in the world. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.